I'll be looking at the Ottoman order of battle at the Battle of Khotyn in 1621. This is a major battle for the Ottoman Empire, marked a major, arguably a very significant turning point in Ottoman history, and also was important in Polish history. It was the first major conflict between Poland and the Ottoman Empire in for about 20 years after the conflicts in Moldavia in the 1590s. I've done another video on the first battle of the war, first campaign of the war in Setsora. So if you want to go look at that video, I recommend it, although I may revisit that topic in the future. But I was able to look at the history of a writer named Abdülkadir Efendi, who wrote a historical chronicle called Topçular Katibi Abdülkadir Efendi Tarihi, which is the history of the artillery clerk Abdülkadir. So he was a military person. He was a secretary in the artillery corps, so he would have been quite well placed to be, to have military documents or informers. He writes in the 17th century, and he dies, as far as we know, in about 1644. And I'll put in the description his article, the article about his life in the Turkish Encyclopedia of Islam. So you can read that with a Google Translate extension if you'd like. But I'll get to the important part of the video, which is the order of battle. This is the my translation of the text, part of the text that describes who's recruited. So we have the troops of Anatolia and the banner lords, presumably from Anatolia, the Beylerbey of Karaman, the Beylerbey of Sivas, and then a bunch of troops from southern Anatolia and Syria, mainly. So all of these that are listed here are feudal troops, or the troops of the provincial governors. So Beylerbey is the Bey of Beys. He's the Lord of Lords, if you will. So he commands all of the troops. A Sanjak Bey is like a smaller kind of commander, more like a district commander, possibly. And then out of these guys, you have 500 from Aleppo, Kul, which it's not clear if they're Janissaries. Kul in this context would mean usually someone in government service, some kind of soldier. It's not quite clear the way it's written, at least not to me. Then we have the people who own two different types of fiefs. So the Zaim, or in which the plural is Zu'ama, and then the holders of the Timar holders. So these are all basically provincial troops and feudal troops. So the Beylerbeys at this point, although I don't have anything in the text to say this may be hired mercenaries. At this point, the provincial governors in the Ottoman Empire tended to hire a lot of private mercenaries because the Timarites didn't always provide manpower. There's no numbers here, but this is kind of the geographic spread. And I made a map to show where they all came from. And well, first here, Khotyn is up here, still exists today. And at that time, it would have been on the northern frontier of the Ottoman Empire. And all of the troops are down here. Now, the one I goofed and left off is Sivas, but Sivas is about like almost kind of 3/4 from between Ankara and Diyarbakir. Which, as I was putting this together, it made me think. I wonder if that's why some of the Ottomans did kind of not so well in the battle, because most of these soldiers would have been from very hot locations sent quite a ways north. You have to remember that during it takes about 3 months, 2.5 to 3 months to get from Istanbul up to the frontier in Hungary. And in this campaign, they do go over the Black Sea and then over land, but this is still quite a ways away. But that's the of the feudal troops. That's the order of battle. Now, there's other troops that are called up as part of this from the kind of the palace. So we have the Sultan's guard, the archers, the Ayabaşları. We have Solaks, and there's some other typical palace units, but there's also a group described as the Segbalani Subaru. So Subaru means mounted, it's from Persian. This would be some kind of mounted mercenary, which is interesting. It's not really explained what that means or how they were outfitted. And then there's some other units also mentioned. Zayarcihan Subaru, some other group that's mounted, and then of course there's Janissaries. The Chronicle also gives figures for some of the equipment that was pulled for the campaign or requisitioned, I guess. So we have, it gives a figure of 5,000 Kantar black powder, specifically from Egypt, which is interesting because in this campaign, Abdülkadir Efendi mentioned specifically in his text that the Hungarian troops were kind of left on the frontier to protect the frontier. And Hungary had a pretty significant Ottoman gunpowder industry, but they call up the black powder from Egypt, and the amount, if it is interesting, is about 600,000 pounds of gunpowder. And then it also mentions there are 20,000, could be either cannonballs, which is what I think it is, or the limber for the guns that are made. And these would have been cannonballs for a type of gun called a badloshka, which could mean a siege gun, but more often it means any kind of cannon, and they usually fire a projectile, according to Gabor Agaçan's book Guns for the Sultan, that's between 1 and 14 kilograms, according to his kick figures, which I have no reason to doubt. And as a side note, if you want any book about the Ottoman army and their gunpowder weapons, Guns for the Sultan is the one to get. Now, with the units, there's other questions like I just mentioned, and also there are other documents, so I'll talk about those for a little bit. And this is where kind of the research can get kind of difficult. So I do have documents from the time of the Khotyn War. So this is one of the registers. This is a kind of an account book of a military account book. I'm actually not sure what this says, because this type of Ottoman script is very hard to read, and it was difficult to read on purpose because this was for the chancery officials to kind of write in a kind of code. But what you're looking at is, you have like on here, like here you've got three kind of rows of text, um, and then you have the numbers at the on the kind of fourth row, if you can see that. So there are documents. There's also one I have that's a Janissary register book from this period. The Muhammad Defteri, which are kind of the normal sources used by a lot of historians of the Ottoman Empire, they don't seem to exist for this period. Now, that would kind of make sense because the Sultan at this time, Osman II, after this campaign, was killed in a regicide. So that's the Sultan on the right. He was a teenager. I think he was around 14 or 15 years old, something like that. And he's murdered by the vizier depicted here in this in this in this miniature painting of Davud Pasha, who kind of signed off on Osman II's execution. But Osman II does go on the campaign. So either maybe the records haven't been cataloged or they don't exist anymore. But these would have been I guess I should explain what those Muhammad Defters were. It was the palace's kind of registers of important affairs, of the orders that were issued by the Sultan, and kind of things that were brought to his attention. Now there is one that's been published that's, I believe, 1618 or 1619, but I haven't had an opportunity to go through that in detail. So I hope you guys found this interesting. Like I said, there's still a lot more to do, but these are my tentative kind of findings. And this seems to be as best I can get. That's a kind of straight explanation of the kind of forces that were, gathered. One thing with handling these Ottoman sources is, they're going to discuss, the troops by their kind of geographic area. That's how they handled calling people up. Everyone was soldiers were part of the feudal soldiers, I should say, were part of, their kind of geographical unit. And like the ones like Diyarbakir, that would probably include, that would be the city of Diyarbakir plus the outside areas, and the same for Aleppo, Damascus, etc. That would cover the city, and then usually a territory quite a ways away from that. So that's the kind of interesting but also challenging thing about doing this kind of research. And like I said, there's also other units that are mentioned in the chronicle that I don't know what they quite mean. And unfortunately, there's a lot of popular books that tend, I think, to take certain nomenclature of units and Ottoman sources, and then apply that to a much longer period of time than maybe it's valid. But that's not really necessarily the author's fault. It's there's not a lot of study on these issues, and also there's the sources can be kind of spotty. We just don't know. There's not necessarily like precise explanations of things in the Ottoman sources all the time. So, but we can get a lot from them, obviously. So, all right. I think that's starting to go on a little bit longer than I would have liked, but I hope you guys found this interesting. And I will talk to you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.